It took us a while to determine why we want to go to the cloud. The biggest question we ask is why, and what's the reason behind it. And when we moved to the cloud with our e-commerce business, we just didn't say we just want to lift and shift. What we did is said, hey, we're just going to rewrite our code to take advantage of the features that Google Cloud has. And it took us 3 years to get there, but when we did, and part of it now, we can see that scalability, because part of our business is we do 60% of our orders online on our e-commerce platform. If that system goes down, it directly impacts our business and all of our franchisees. So our goal is to have scalability, also have a complete redundancy in our system, so that we should be up 100% of the time. And that's when we start putting our benchmark together. That's what we do. Also, agility. How well do we add new technology? How well do we change as the business asks us to change, especially our marketing folks? So those are the measurements we look at and said, okay, this is why we need to move to the cloud. You have to move with a purpose. You just don't move to the cloud because that's the way everyone else is going. We own our data centers. It doesn't cost us any less if we move one or two applications to the cloud, but we'll have to look at the benefit and purpose why we're moving there. Also adding new technology to the system, the way we build it. It's all microservices, so we can add, think of Lego blocks, right? You keep on adding more and more module to it, and it continued to scale. And we're looking at a long-term solution for our platform.
We have extensive production applications, all of which are legacy, all of which are on-prem. Certainly, anytime there's a new application to consider, we go SaaS, or we're in the middle of putting in Workday, that's SaaS. We run Office 365 and Teams, that's SaaS. So applications going forward is clearly cloud, but we've got a lot of legacy crap around. There's a ton of infrastructure for that legacy crap, hundreds of offices and plants. 5 years ago, a lot of infrastructure was on-prem. So our strategy is to shift it all to a public cloud. We don't really want to be in the data center business, and we're not. It's all gone now. Mostly infrastructure as a service for both store and compute. We're happy to let somebody else run it. We don't really want to run data centers. We make auto parts. From a cyber perspective, I'm happy to let the cloud provider worry about it. It's way easier for them to worry about it than for me to worry about, given the decentralized model and the on-prem messiness that we're dealing with. Probably another big strategic variable for us is where the cloud is, right? So we've got a giant business in China. We make more cars in China than North America these days. And in China, the data has to stay there. There's a residency requirement. In Europe, the data has to be in Europe. There's privacy issues. There's latency issues. So there's a global angle to that. There's a procurement angle to that. So we've got Azure, we've got Amazon, we've got Google. We can't have a single supplier, because then we'd be held up for ransom from a procurement point of view and a backup and resiliency point of view. So it goes on, right? So our strategy is a bit of all of that. The second part of the question, is it right for us? Well, it's so context sensitive. We think it's the right balance of speed to deploy, utility, security, and cost. All of those are considerations here. It's certainly our experience that with respect to cost, it's not necessarily cheaper. When you factor in all of vendor management and multi-supplier architecture you got to do, and configuration and monitoring, it's probably the same number of people. It's just they're doing different kinds of work, but it's a different, to us, it's a different risk profile, and it's a different speed agility profile.
The top two reasons statistically are why cloud fails for organization. Doesn't mean they left cloud. It's just the reasons they failed is resiliency, meaning it wasn't architected for the failures that cloud produced that are different than on-premise, and cost. It didn't reduce the cost. And I think it was alluded to. And I think the most important piece about that is the operating model that needs to span hybrid, which is the most common approach today, has to care about the legacy crap. Again, I come back to the burden. If you have a team, either they do vendor management or they do your own data centers. If you don't span the operating model to include the legacy, the burden that the legacy produces will continue to exist. And then you take on a new data center. What that means is you need to create equilibrium again, and DevOps is all about equilibrium. We'd be creating an app with CloudBees about this. Is you can solve equilibrium in 3 ways. Hire people, which we can't find, make people work harder, which will make them leave, or you can orchestrate more. The approach that we've done with hybrid is also very important. If I buy a car and I leave it in my driveway running, it's my car, I don't care. If I rent a car and leave it in my driveway running for 3 months, I'm bad. Like, that's not how you operate and manage your budget. So this is where the engineering practices, the IT practices all need to change and operate within the ability to destroy. Destroy becomes a stage of operation, because if you don't destroy it, you'll pay for it, and then you won't save your dollars. And I'll touch on the most important piece, which is the scariest part. If you go to a managed service and you go down that path, and you go entirely down that path, what happens is the talent pool won't be attracted to your company. You will lose the ability to foster innovation through technology because someone else is doing that for you and you're dependent on them. So it's usually teach your team to do it with low burden, and don't get tied to the point where you're completely dependent on your innovation and technology innovation on someone else. It doesn't matter if it's your core value or not. The end result is technology moves. You need to have people that can move ahead of it. And if you let it to someone else, you leave yourself at risk.
Some of the keys that we've tried to implement are, I think others already mentioned it here, automate and make it easier than when you used to go on-prem to the cloud. If it's still going to be as hard as it used to be to go on-prem and there's multiple teams and silos involved, they're not going to get there. The other piece we looked at was ensure that we turn on services that are relevant to the applications or the business that we use. Too often we see companies adopting cloud and just turning it on open greenfield for everybody to use whatever services the cloud has. So we turned on services that are relevant for us that we can use. We automated the consumption of those services. We started that as an automation of a single service, then moved to a combination of multiple services to form a pattern. And as you can see, the whole path to getting to the cloud, we made it easier. And that was a bit more appetizing because I know speed to market may be an overused term, but then it was speed to actually getting things into the customer's hands, and as well making that self-serve. So you got the technologists out of the way and the old legacy processes out of the way. But that involved some cajoling and as well pre-planning and working with the business on those areas. And last but not least, also working on something we call the WAF, the well-architected framework, so that when they actually move to the cloud, you see the benefits immediately. When you see that you can shut off devices when you're not using it, and then because we operate in the model of development is production for developers, well, not all developers are developing overnight, maybe in different countries, but those sitting in North America are not using devices or compute that they need to keep running while they are sleeping at home. So simple things like that have helped us get to cloud adoption early, as well as the overarching thing is not cloud for the sake of moving cloud. Move to the cloud for the right reasons, which includes leveraging the features, getting the benefits, as well as reaping all the business aspects that you can speed up by getting to that service.
Cloud economics plays a major role. I personally believe we have over-promised a lot of savings and business is happy, but at the end of the day, how are you going to make the economics work? And don't innovate too fast. First, get to the midterm and then think about innovation. The operating model is big in terms of roles and responsibilities, processes, whether it's going to be centrally led or the lines of business are going to do it. I think that's going to be key. The last is about the entire delivery execution and the change management, including training and staffing.
We're trying to accelerate our cloud journey. It was slow to begin with, but we've structured our approach around kind of 3 areas: so people, process, and technology. So on the people side, we've hired the right leadership in this space to kind of guide us towards how we do application migration, plus as well as ongoing support. Also, ensuring that we have the right internal talent through training, upskilling, and using T-shaped training approaches, and also then filling gaps with external help. So hiring externally, but also using partners to kind of help us down that path. From a process side, it's obviously ensuring that we are not using the same process that we did in the traditional data center space and optimizing this for cloud. I think it was mentioned before about how do you deal with the existing data center. Our approach is we have a hybrid operating model. So the existing team members that are on-prem will also be supporting the stack inside of the AWS. So from a technology perspective, which is where most people kind of jump towards the beginning, is around understanding what technology stack you're going to use. So which one of the big partners. We're currently in AWS shop with ambitions to get into a multi-cloud approach over the next couple of years. But right now we're focused on AWS. And then lastly, just kind of we're focusing on using containerization of our applications and replatforming, refactoring, as opposed to just kind of deploying things on EC2 instances. So kind of in summary, it's the age-old kind of three areas: people, process, technology, and that's allowed us to build a proper foundation that has allowed us now to accelerate really quickly for app migration.